I knew something was off the moment I stepped through the doorway. They all looked up for a fraction of a second and then went right back to their conversations, their drinks, their plates. No greetings. No smiles. Not even a nod from his mother. And my husband, my own husband, just sat there like he didn't notice the sudden shift in air. Like it was all normal. I clutched the casserole dish in my hands a little tighter. My knuckles turned white beneath the foil. That dish, my mother's secret recipe, was still warm, still perfect. I had spent 3 hours making it.
For them.
But nobody even cleared space on the table for it. I walked into that dining room with a fake smile and a thudding heart. My heels clicked on the hardwood, echoing louder than anyone's words. The chairs were all full, of course. Even the side bench had someone's jacket tossed over it. I stood for a beat too long before pretending to laugh lightly and asking, "Where should I put this?" No one answered me. Not even his sister, who was busy pouring wine for everyone except me. That's when I realized this wasn't an accident. They didn't forget me. They chose to ignore me. I found a corner of the counter, away from the main table, and set the casserole down like it was made of glass. My stomach burned. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was a deep, searing recognition. A knowing.
One I didn't want to admit.
They didn't want me here. And yet, they had invited me. Or at least he had. My husband told me, "It's just a family dinner, babe. Super casual. You'll love it. Mom's been asking when you're coming around again." Had she? She hadn't even looked at me since I walked in. I tried to play cool. Smile.
Breathe. Blend.
But you can't blend into a table where you were never meant to belong. I found a seat at the very end of the table, near the side with the mismatched chair, the kind they give to people who show up late or weren't expected at all. I smoothed down my dress and tried to look engaged, even though no one looked my way. It was like I was sitting behind glass. They laughed at jokes I wasn't part of, exchanged inside stories I'd never been told, and passed dishes down the table without once offering them to me. I watched his cousin hand the mashed potatoes to her fiancé, skip me, and move straight to his brother.
I almost said something.
Almost. But then I saw my husband's eyes. He wasn't ignoring me, but he also wasn't with me. He had that nervous glance, like someone caught between two rooms filling with smoke, unsure of which fire to put out first. He gave me a tight smile. That's it. That was all I got. That's when the voice inside me whispered, "They've done this before. You just didn't want to see it." It wasn't the first time I'd been left out of the family group chat. Or the vacation plans. Or the holiday photos they never sent me. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like a shadow following my husband into someone else's life. But this was the first time it was so obvious. Aunt Julia commented about how some people just don't understand family traditions. His brother joked about how new blood always thinks they know better. His sister leaned in and said loudly to her husband, "She'll probably post about this on Instagram like she belongs here." I wanted to scream.
Cry. Run.
But instead, I sat there, perfectly still, and smiled. A new kind of energy started to rise in me. It was slow at first, like water boiling under the surface. But it was coming. Something about the way they treated me flipped a switch. Something primitive. Something powerful. I started to catalog everything. Every side-eye. Every slight. Every insult dipped in sugar and served with a grin. I took mental notes like I was preparing for war. They didn't know it yet, but they had made a mistake. Because I remembered everything. And I never played the victim well, but revenge? Oh, that I could master. I looked around the table and thought, "You won't forget me after this. Not tonight. Not ever." And that casserole? Still untouched. Still steaming. A symbol now. Not of hospitality, but of insult. Of being dismissed. And maybe, just maybe, of something I could use. Because no matter how much they tried to ignore me, I would not be silent. Not anymore. And I already knew how this dinner would end. But they didn't. The tension at the table was palpable now. I could feel it in my fingertips, the way they clenched around my napkin. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It had steadied itself in a cold, calculated rhythm. I couldn't keep pretending that this was just a bad dinner with a bunch of people who didn't know how to act.
No.
This was something deeper, something more deliberate. It wasn't a mistake that they'd ignored me. No, this was the family's usual game. And I had just been handed my role in it. They were testing me, pushing me, trying to see how much I'd take before I broke. But what they didn't know was that I had learned their game years ago. Every little comment, every whispered remark, every condescending look, they all added up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. I noticed my husband was becoming more uncomfortable. His shoulders hunched as the conversation swirled around him, becoming more and more centered on his sister's wedding plans. Of course, the wedding was always the topic of conversation whenever I was around. Always about her, never about me. And his mother. God, his mother was the worst. She sat at the head of the table, as regal and cold as ever, silently watching everything unfold. She was the queen of passive aggression, her silence more cutting than anything she could have said. She never had to raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her eyes did all the talking. I could feel the weight of her gaze on me, but I refused to look at her. Instead, I kept my eyes on my plate, pretending to be absorbed in the food I had prepared, my way of keeping some semblance of control. I'd been the one who had spent hours cooking, the one who had wanted to contribute to this family, and yet here I was, the outsider, still trying to find a place to fit in. There was no place for me at this table. Not in their world. The more I watched them, the more my anger simmered beneath the surface. Each passing moment felt like a personal challenge. And the worst part was that my husband was just sitting there, acting like nothing was wrong. He was laughing at his brother's jokes, nodding along to his father's stories. He hadn't even noticed how they were treating me. It was almost like I didn't exist. Like I was a ghost who had wandered into their family's perfect little world, disrupting the illusion they had carefully crafted. And they didn't like it. They didn't want me here. At some point, Aunt Julia leaned in to whisper something to me, her tone dripping with thinly veiled judgment. "Don't worry, dear," she said with a forced smile. "You'll get used to it. Family dinners aren't for everyone. You'll find your place eventually." Her words stung more than I let on, and I managed to hold back the retort that was burning in my throat. Instead, I smiled faintly, nodding as if I agreed with her. But inside, my mind was racing. I don't need to fit in here. I wasn't trying to be part of their club. They had pushed me to the margins, but it didn't mean I had to stay there. I didn't want to fit in anymore. What I wanted was something else. Something more powerful. I wanted them to remember me. I wanted them to feel what it was like to ignore me, to push me aside, as if I didn't matter. They would remember this dinner, and it would haunt them long after I was gone. I could see it now, my plan unfolding like a delicate web. I would make them regret this. I would take what they'd thrown away and make it into something they could never forget. As the evening dragged on, my husband finally noticed the unease on my face. He leaned in close, whispering my name as if he was trying to soothe me. But it wasn't working. His attempt at comfort felt like a weak bandage on a wound that needed stitches. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern, but not the kind of concern I needed. It was the kind of concern you give when you want to avoid a confrontation, when you want everything to stay calm on the surface. But I wasn't calm anymore. "I'm fine," I said with a cold smile, though I could feel the heat of my words burning the space between us. "I'm just enjoying the company." But my eyes told a different story. I could see the flicker of realization in his gaze. He knew I wasn't fine, but it didn't seem to matter. His attention drifted back to his cousin, and just like that, I was invisible again. As the evening wore on, I found myself withdrawing further into my thoughts, watching them from the sidelines. Their conversations started to feel more distant, more absurd. They laughed about things I didn't understand, debated matters that didn't concern me. And yet, I was here, surrounded by these people who couldn't even be bothered to pretend they cared. But something inside me was shifting. I wasn't angry in the way I had been when I first walked in.
No.
Now I was calm, cold even. I had become a spectator in my own life, watching this dinner unfold like a movie I could control. The tension was building, and I was ready for the next move. They had underestimated me. I was ready to make sure they'd never forget me again. I excused myself from the table under the guise of needing to use the restroom. I walked down the hallway, each step echoing in the silence of the house. As I turned the corner, I found myself standing in the kitchen, my mind racing. The quiet in here was different. No eyes watching, no judgments being cast. I opened the fridge. The cool air hit my face as I pulled out the bottle of wine that had been chilling there all evening. I poured myself a glass, letting the amber liquid slosh over the rim. The taste was rich, bold, and gave me a sense of comfort. This is what they want me to do, I thought bitterly. To shrink, to hide, to let them keep making me feel small. But I wasn't going to let them do that anymore. I took a long sip, staring out the window at the darkened yard. The stars seemed distant, just like I felt in this family. But that distance was about to close. They wouldn't ignore me again. Not after tonight. I had been standing in the kitchen for what felt like hours, trying to steady my nerves, when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. My heart skipped a beat. It was my husband, and he was looking for me. For a moment, I considered hiding, pretending I was still lost in the bathroom or in another room. But I couldn't. I couldn't run away anymore. The footsteps grew louder, and I heard the familiar voice call my name. "Hey, where'd you go?" His tone was casual, but I could sense the slight edge in it. He was starting to feel the tension too. I didn't turn around immediately. Instead, I took another sip of wine, letting it settle in my stomach, as if preparing myself for what was about to unfold. When I finally turned, he was standing in the doorway, looking at me with a mixture of concern and confusion. "I just needed a break," I said, trying to sound calm. But I could feel the storm brewing inside me, and I knew it wouldn't be long before I couldn't hold it in any longer. He stepped further into the kitchen, his brow furrowed. "What's going on? You've barely said anything all night." I opened my mouth to respond, but then I saw it. His mother, standing in the doorway behind him, watching us both. Her eyes were like daggers, cold and calculating. She hadn't even bothered to announce her presence. She had simply appeared, as if she was always there, lurking in the shadows. I didn't know if she had heard our conversation or if she had just been waiting for the right moment to intervene, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to end well. "Are you upset?" she asked, her voice smooth, almost too smooth, like she was savoring the discomfort she was causing. "Did we say something that bothered you?" I could feel my blood pressure rising as I looked at her. Her presence was suffocating, and I was sick of pretending that I didn't see through her carefully constructed facade. She wasn't concerned. She was never concerned. She was here to maintain control, to make sure I knew my place. "I'm fine," I said, my tone biting. I just needed a moment. But even as I spoke, I could see my husband's expression change. The confusion in his eyes deepened. He was starting to connect the dots, starting to understand that something was off, but he wasn't quite there yet. Not completely. His mother, on the other hand, was already working her magic. She stepped closer to me, her smile sweet but calculating. "You know," she said softly, "we really don't like to see you so upset. You've been part of this family for a long time now. You've got to understand, dinner isn't just about the food. It's about coming together." I wanted to scream, to throw the glass of wine in her face, and let her know exactly what I thought of her. But I held my composure, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I understand," I said, my voice tight. "I understand perfectly." But what I really understood was that this wasn't about the dinner at all. It wasn't about the food or the conversation or the fact that they had ignored me. This was about power, control. And I had had enough. I looked at my husband, and for the first time all night, I could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes. He knew. He had seen it now, the way his family treated me. But he still didn't get it. Not completely. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, taking a step toward me. "I didn't realize you were feeling this way." But his apology felt hollow. It felt rehearsed, like a line he had learned to say when things got difficult. I had heard it too many times before. And that's when it hit me. My mother-in-law's sweet smile, my husband's empty apology, they were all part of the same game. A game I had been playing for far too long, one that I was done with. I took a deep breath and set my glass down on the counter, feeling the weight of the moment settle on me. This wasn't just a dinner anymore. This was the breaking point, and I was about to make sure they'd never forget me. You know, I said slowly, my voice calm but sharp, I've tried to be the good wife, the good daughter-in-law. I've spent hours in this kitchen, preparing meals, trying to fit in, trying to make myself invisible so I wouldn't cause any trouble. But I've learned something tonight. I don't need to fit in. I don't need your approval, your validation. There was a stunned silence, and I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. My husband's eyes were wide now, his mouth slightly open. My mother-in-law's smile had faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. I'm not the problem here, I continued, my voice gaining strength. The problem is how you've treated me, how you've made me feel like I don't belong. I'm not invisible, and I'm done pretending I am. I looked at my husband then, and for the first time, I didn't see a man trying to make everything okay. I saw a man who was realizing, too late, that he had been part of the problem all along. And in that moment, I knew something had changed between us. I turned back to my mother-in-law, my gaze steady. This family doesn't get to dictate my worth anymore. Not tonight, not ever again. The silence that followed was suffocating, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. I had said the words, but now I had no idea how they would react. But I didn't care anymore. I had made my stand, and they would remember me. The air felt thick, suffocating, as I stood there, my words hanging between us like a bomb ready to explode. My husband stood frozen, as if caught between the woman he had married and the family he had been raised in. His mother, on the other hand, was staring at me, her eyes narrowing as if trying to decipher whether I was bluffing or if I truly meant it. I felt the weight of the room close in on me. It was as if everything had shifted, the tables had turned, and now I was the one in control. But the fear, the doubt, still lingered. What if this backfired? What if I had finally pushed them too far?
But no.
I couldn't back down now. Not when I had come this far. Are you serious? My husband's voice broke the silence. His words were shaky, laced with disbelief. You're talking like this because of dinner? You've got to be kidding me. I could feel the tension in the air, crackling like electricity, but I wasn't about to let him dismiss my feelings as if they were nothing. Not again. It's not just dinner, I snapped, finally meeting his gaze head-on. It's everything. The way your family treats me like I'm invisible, like I'm nothing. It's the way I've bent over backward to please them, and it's never enough. I'm done. His face reddened, and I could see the anger building behind his eyes. For a split second, I thought he might say something, anything, to make it right, but then his mother intervened. That's enough, she said, her voice cold and authoritative. She stepped forward, her eyes locked on me with a look that sent a chill down my spine. Don't you dare talk to my son like that. You are nothing without us. We've been nothing but good to you, and this is how you repay us. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm.
It was a test now.
I had to prove that I was stronger than this. Stronger than her. Stronger than the family I had tried so hard to fit into. I'm not nothing, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and hurt. I've spent so much time trying to prove myself to you, to earn your approval. But what do I get in return? Nothing but disdain and disrespect. I deserve more than that. My husband looked torn. His eyes flickered between me and his mother, as though caught in an internal battle. He opened his mouth, and for a moment, I thought he might apologize again, offer the same empty words that always seemed to leave me feeling more alone than ever. But instead, he hesitated. Mom, stop, he said, his voice more firm now, though still uncertain. Maybe she's right. Maybe we haven't been treating her fairly. My heart skipped a beat at his words. For the first time, I could see the shift. He wasn't just blindly defending his mother anymore. There was something else in his eyes. Guilt, perhaps? Regret? Was he finally starting to see me? But before I could process this new development, his mother's voice cut through the air like a knife. Don't be ridiculous, she hissed. She's manipulating you. She's making you think she's the victim, but she's the one who's causing all the trouble. Don't listen to her. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, trying to push him back into line, back into the role he had always played. A role that didn't include me. But this time, it didn't work. At least, not completely. My husband's eyes flickered between us, his expression a mixture of frustration and confusion. He was caught between the woman he loved and the woman who had always controlled him, the one who had shaped his every decision, his every thought. But now, the cracks in her armor were starting to show. And I wasn't about to let her win this battle. I'm not a child anymore, Mom, he said, his voice steady, but his jaw clenched. I can make my own decisions. I'm married, and I love my wife. I'm not going to sit here and let you tear her down. His words hit me like a wave, and for the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe he wasn't as lost as I had thought. Maybe there was hope for us after all. But then, as if to remind us both who truly held the power in this family, his mother's eyes burned with fury. You're making a mistake, son, she said, her voice dangerously calm. This is your family. This is where your loyalty should lie. I saw my husband flinch at her words, the weight of his loyalty pulling him in two different directions. But instead of backing down, he stood his ground. No, Mom, he said, his voice hardening. I've been loyal to you my whole life. But this is my wife. I've chosen her. It felt like the earth had shifted beneath me, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. Was this really happening? Was he really choosing me? His mother's face contorted with rage, her hands balled into fists. You will regret this, she spat, her voice trembling with fury. You'll see. I didn't care anymore. I had made my stand. I had broken the cycle of silence, and now I could finally breathe. The weight of the years of suffocating expectations, of playing the part they had scripted for me, was lifting. I looked at my husband one more time, and for the first time in years, I saw him, not as the man who was afraid to stand up to his mother, but as the man who had made his choice. Thank you, I whispered. And then, without another word, I turned and walked away from the dinner table. I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not his family, make me feel small again. The silence in the house was deafening after I left the dinner table. I could hear nothing but the thudding of my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears, as I made my way up the stairs. I thought I would feel relief, or even triumph, but instead, a wave of exhaustion swept over me. I had done it. I had stood up for myself. But at what cost? I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind spinning, trying to process everything that had just happened. My husband had chosen me. He had actually chosen me. But the weight of his mother's anger still hung in the air. What would happen now? Would he stand by me in the long run? Or was this just a momentary victory before the pressure from his family crushed us both? I pulled my knees up to my chest, feeling small despite the immense act of bravery I had just committed. I had hoped that standing my ground would make things easier, that somehow everything would be different now. But the reality was far more complicated. There was a soft knock on the door, and I didn't need to hear another word to know it was him. I didn't move at first, too afraid of the conversation that was about to unfold. But after a long, tense moment, I heard the door creak open, and then he stepped inside. I need to talk to you, he said quietly, his voice low, almost apologetic. His face was pale, and his eyes were filled with the same confusion and guilt that had been swirling in them all night. I didn't say anything at first. Part of me wanted to yell, to ask him why he hadn't stood up for me sooner, why he had let his family treat me the way they had for so long. But I kept my mouth shut, waiting for him to say what he needed to say. He sat down next to me on the bed, and for a long moment, we both just stared at the floor, the tension between us thick and uncomfortable. Finally, he broke the silence. I don't know what to do now, he confessed, his voice cracking. I love you, but my family, they've been a part of my life for so long. I don't know how to just cut them off. I felt my chest tighten, the words I had been holding back rising to the surface. I didn't ask you to cut them off. I just want you to see me, to see how I've been treated. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family. I'm asking you to stand with me, to stand by me, even when they don't. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between the woman he had married and the family that had shaped him into the man he was. The realization hit me hard. He was caught in the middle, and no matter how much he loved me, it wasn't going to be easy for him to break free from the bonds of his family's expectations. He nodded slowly, his hand reaching out to take mine. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. But I promise I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be the husband you deserve. You don't deserve this. You don't deserve to feel like you're invisible. I felt a lump form in my throat at his words, but I pushed it down. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being seen. It wasn't perfect, and I knew there were still so many challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Hope that things could get better. But just as I was beginning to feel a sense of peace, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, cutting through the silence like a knife. My heart sank as I saw the name on the screen, his mother. I have to take this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his expression hardening. I could feel his anxiety and uncertainty in the air as I swiped to answer. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my hands trembling. Her voice on the other end of the line was colder than I had ever heard it. You think this is over? She spat. You think you've won? You're wrong.
This isn't the end.
This is only the beginning. My stomach twisted in knots. What do you mean? I demanded, my voice growing sharper. You have no idea what you've just done, she said, her voice filled with venom. You've shattered our family. You've torn apart everything we've built. And I will not stand by and let you ruin everything my son has worked for. You'll regret this. Before I could respond, she hung up and the line went dead. I sat there, my heart racing, as I stared at the screen.
She was threatening me.
She was going to make this as difficult as possible for both of us. And just like that, my hopes for a peaceful resolution seemed to crumble. My husband reached out for my hand again, his grip tight. What did she say? He asked, his voice filled with concern. She said it's only the beginning. I murmured, my throat tight. She's not done with me yet. She's going to make us pay. He cursed under his breath, his anger flaring up once more. I'll handle her. She won't get away with this. But as much as I wanted to believe that, a nagging feeling twisted in my gut. I had a feeling that this battle was far from over. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to face something far darker than I had ever imagined.